for joining us. I'm Diane Rehm. Defense Secretary Robert Gates' 2010 budget proposal lays out fundamental shifts in spending priorities. He intends to cut back or eliminate many traditional and expensive weapon systems, but wants to boost spending in areas that support the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the threat of new and non-conventional attacks. Joining me in the studio to discuss Secretary Gates' spending plans and their strategic implications, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, U.S. Army retired, Rebecca Grant, she's Senior Fellow at the Lexington Institute, and John Bennett, he's a reporter for Defense News. I hope you'll join us as well. Call us on 800-433-8850. Send your email to drshow@wamu.org. And don't forget, you can reach us through Facebook and Twitter. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
John Bennett, I'll start with you. Tell us the general objectives that Secretary Gates was laying out in this new defense budget proposal.
Diane, he really laid out a sweeping plan yesterday. A lot of people are saying this is perhaps the biggest reorganization of the Pentagon in several areas since 1986. He laid out three broad objectives. The first one is he firmly stated a commitment to take care of the military's people. Things like fully funding the ground force, the Army and Marine Corps, in strength increase, money for medical research, child care, spousal support, and moving all of the funding for those things into the annual budget. Some of those things had been in supplementals in the past. He wants them permanently funded, and he's gotten general acclaim for that. The second, and this is a lot of the headlines, he wants to rebalance the weapons portfolio. He canceled some things like the F-22. The Army's Future Combat Systems program doesn't look today what it looked like at this time yesterday. He has thrown out the vehicles and some of the other components of that. He has canceled or stopped the Air Force's Combat Search and Rescue program. And one of the upshots here is he really wants to focus on technologies and weapons platforms for the fights of today. And one example of that, he wants more Predator and Reaper unmanned aerial vehicles for surveillance and to target fleeting targets. And one of the third objective is he wants, and this has become a buzzword lately, he wants major procurement reform. The details of exactly what the administration has in mind, we're still waiting on a lot of those details. We have the Levin McCain bill up on the Hill that's working its way through the process. He endorsed that bill yesterday, and it's unclear exactly if the administration's priorities are now in that bill as it's being rewritten and working through the process, or if they might push for more changes.
John Bennett, he's a reporter for Defense News. What would you say, John, is the most controversial aspect of what the Secretary has laid out?
Wow, how long's the show? I think stopping the F-22 program at 187 jets, the firestorm started immediately on Capitol Hill. Statements were going out from members whose constituencies, jobs, that's what that means. And Congress is really going to, I think, push back. And they may even buy more jets. They may even give the Pentagon even more money. On the face of this, some people have said there looks to be maybe a calculation on the Pentagon's part. Why budget for more expensive F-22s if Congress may buy them on their own? The catch there, if you listen to what Secretary Gates said yesterday, he said all the military advice he has gotten over the last several months, including from the Air Force, says there is not a military requirement for more than 187.
Interesting. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, how do you view this budget as presented by Secretary Gates?
Well, in fairness to Secretary Gates, he does not have a new national military strategy with new national military goals from the Obama administration. He's dealing with the legacy of the Bush years, of which he was a part. And I think he's really sort of shifting money within that old framework. And he's dealing really with the requirement to, in the current environment, to satisfy a diversity of interests. You've got interests on the Hill, as John's pointed out, in keeping certain things going. He's tried to meet some of those. On the other hand, he's tried to shift more money into sustaining the status quo in Iraq and Afghanistan, which again is an interest on the part of some but not all. And then finally, there's the obvious interest to some extent in trying to do something about programs that have been around for quite a while that absorbed billions of dollars and effectively produced nothing.
Would you agree that the F-22 or the halting of production of the F-22 is going to be one of the most controversial aspects?
It may be, but I think, we say controversial. We're tinkering on the margins of an old structure, an old budget, old thinking.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like tinkering to me when you've got an F-22 that has, as John has pointed out, has parts developments all over the country.
Well, that's true for the future combat system. I mean, this is the game all the services have learned to play, which is to sprinkle your programs all over the United States to make it hard to cancel. The reason I say it's not terribly controversial is because people on the Hill 10 years ago tried to cancel this program for which they could find no requirement. So I shy away from the notion of controversy because there is no existential threat to the U.S.
So what would you have liked to have seen with this budget?
Well, the first thing we really need from this administration is a new national military strategy that articulates new strategic goals. We haven't gotten that. This thing is running on autopilot. And that's why I say you've got to be fair to Secretary Gates. He hasn't gotten very deliberate strategic guidance from the new president.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor, U.S. Army, retired. His recent book is titled Warrior's Rage. And turning to you now, Rebecca Grant, what's your perspective on Secretary Gates' budget?
Well, Secretary Gates has given us a spy master's budget. It's very interesting to watch how he's pulled this off. He formed most of his national defense strategy last summer, and there were some interesting reports at that time. Michelle Flournoy, who is now serving in the Pentagon as the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, said back in July that Gates' strategy was destined to be overtaken by events. I agree with my colleague Doug. We haven't seen what the Obama team really wants. But to me, the big problem is not focusing on irregular warfare. We all agree irregular warfare needs our attention.
Describe to me what you mean by irregular warfare.
We're talking about the Special Operations Forces working in Afghanistan, and we're talking about the challenges of counterinsurgency, countering Taliban and other anti-Afghan forces. We've seen that in Iraq, too. But the point is that under the right strategy, conventional, traditional forces play a big role. Afghanistan has some very heavy forces there right now. We have F-15Es stationed at Bagram, A-10s as well, Royal Air Force Harriers down in Kandahar. The Army has all sorts of firepower there, from their most sophisticated mortars up to their big 105s and 155s. So under